What's up guys, Alex here back again. So as I had mentioned, we were hoping to actually record a lot more games live ourselves at certain sort of tournaments that we're actually able to attend, particularly those in the UK, sort of the League Cups that we're able to attend quite often and quite frequently every weekend. So hopefully this gives you just a bit of an insight in terms of the decks being played, how different players are actually able to pilot some of the decks, and just overall give you a chance to actually see the decks in action in a real live tournament instead of necessarily on PTCGO or just maybe through some of your sort of friendly testing. So big shout out to Chase Games in Cannock and Dan Cecil, who was able to give me the space and help me with some of the equipment to actually provide some of this recorded footage of actual gameplay for you guys. Hopefully you guys don't dislike my commentary a bit too much at all. Hopefully it's not too bad. If not, just turn sound down and actually just watch the games go on. So without further ado, this is round 1 of the Burning Shadows League Cup in at Chase Games in Cannock. On the left we have Tamao Cameron playing Gardevoir, and on the right hand side we have Jack Eccles playing Golispod Zoroark. Alright guys, so it looks like they're ready to start, and we have Jack Eccles, as mentioned, playing Golispod Zoroark and is starting first. So here in his hand already he has both Wimpod and Zoroark and attaches the energy to the bench Wimpod. It looks like he's also, just considering, I think I saw a Lele there in his hand as well, and an N which he's considering playing, but he plays Lele for the ability Wonder Tag, which allows to search his deck for a supporter card. So having a quick look through, it looks like he's going to grab a Bridget, which is quite interesting as he already has 2 bench Pokemon, a second Wimpod and a Zoroark already. So just so you guys are aware, Golispod GX has 210 HP as a GX Pokemon at stage 1. Its first attack is for 1 grass energy. It deals 30 damage, but if this Pokemon was promoted to the active position during that turn, it does 90 damage more. So it does 120 damage for 1 grass energy. So as you see, Jack has actually played the N. So he went through his deck, realized because he already has a pretty decent board with a second Wimpod and a Zoroark down, he doesn't really need to actually use any other supporter card. And it looks like he's just passed his turn, so Tamao has actually just drawn his first card, starting a route. Immediately plays an N, which is interesting, so obviously that N from Jack wasn't too fruitful for Tamao at all. So also just says, so you guys are aware, in case you didn't, which is very unlikely as it is, Tamao's playing Gardevoir GX, which is a stage 2 Pokemon. It has an ability, Secret Spring, so once during your turn you may attach a fairy energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon, and it has the attack Infinite Force, which for 1 fairy does 30 times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon. So Tamao benches the second routes and again passes his go, so it's not the greatest of starts for Tamao, but generally that's all he really needs. He doesn't actually need too much more. Here Jack is drawn his card, playing an Ultra Ball, and it's very likely he's going to be searching out for his Golispod to really start putting pressure on Tamao and potentially take the first KO of the game if he's able to retreat the active Wimpod to his bench Golispod, and as you can see he's grabbed it just there. In his hand he has a Guzma and an Acerola, so he is very likely here, and he does play the Guzma after all, to bring active the Golispod GX, allowing him to do the first impression attack and doing 120 damage and taking the first prize of the game. Now Tamao is in a position where he does have Ultra Ball and he's discarded the rare candy in N, so it's very possible that he might actually have a second rare candy in hand, which will allow him to actually evolve his routes into a Gardevoir GX and hopefully start being able to recover, or having already lost the first prize of the game. It looks like Tamao's having a quick search through, as this is his first search through the actual deck, so it's always good to sort of work out your prizes. He actually looks like he's just getting another routes. sort of believing that he really needs to set up more than just the one Pokemon. Oh, he does actually have a rare candy Gardevoir in hand already, and plays down his hand to 0 and plays an N, putting Jack down to 5 cards in hand due to having only 5 prizes left, and Tamao drawing a full 6. So Gardevoir is able to attack with just 1 energy. Here it does need a fairy energy, can't attack with just a DCE, but that will start to do 60 damage initially, and then, you know, with the ability and manual attachments, it does start to rack up a lot of damage. So here Tamao's attached the choice band and fairy energy, dealing 90 damage to the Golispod. Now the good thing with Jack's deck is, so we've seen Golispod partnered with Gardevoir, which is what we've seen with Complexity Card Gaming's Mark Lutz, who won the recent Bremen regionals with Golispod Gardevoir. But with Zoroark, he's able to use Zoroark's ability to actually stand in and then potentially retreat back into the Golispod, so he can actually chain attacks a bit more frequently than necessarily always using a supporter. We see Jack here actually Ultra Ball for the Oranguru, so he senses that he's very likely to take a lot of early prizes, go into sort of a good prize lead, and he's got quite a small hand anyway. This sort of allows him to actually protect himself from any late or mid game ends. Additionally, he's also actually evolved another Wimpod on the bench to the stage 1 non-GX Golispod, which has a pretty cool ability. I believe it takes less damage. Yep, it's just making sure. It's a stage 1 Golispod, which has the ability armor, so it takes 30 less damage after applying weakness and resistance. So Jack here from the instruct had an N, so plays the N, so ends himself back to 5 cards in hand. And I believe he has a Tapu Koko, looks like a Float Stone, and a DCE. I can't really make out the other couple of cards, but he has a couple of options here. He can attach the DCE to the active and use Crossing Cut GX, which is Golispod's GX attack, which does 150. And yes, he does, and it then retreats back onto the bench, sending up the Zoroark and dealing 150 damage, which is pretty good. With a choice band, it does 180, so it does do a lot of damage and does puts on a lot of pressure. Now Tamao here really needs to set up a second Gardevoir so that he can start, you know, taking advantage of using Gardevoir's ability to really put more energy on the board. So there he is attaching. It's very likely using Secret Spring to attach the energy to the Curlier there, and then uses yet again, as Golispod had free energy on it themselves. Infinite Force is actually doing 120 plus 30 from the choice band, 150, actually knocking out the Golispod. So Tamao's not in a terrible spot here. He does have a damaged Gardevoir. He's also limiting the damage that Zoroark could potentially do. And he's slowly building up that Ralts or Curlier on the bench as well. So now, hopefully, in his next turn, he will hope to set up a second Gardevoir, start attaching more energy maybe to the second Gardevoir and taking more KOs. So here Jack Ultra Balls his hand down to 0, gets a Zoroark, as I mentioned, has that attack where it does 10 plus 30 for each Pokemon on your opponent's on your opponent's bench, and also has that standing ability as I've already mentioned. So Jack instructs for free, finds the Float Stone, but it doesn't look like he's found much else. So he does send up the Tapu Koko active, and this is where Tamao's starting to really build his deck now. So he benches a third Ralts, and Sycamores a lot of his hand away, including currently less useful cards like a Bridget. As you can see there, Tamao also plays an Eevee, so he's actually also playing a 1-1 Sylveon line. So a lot of people are actually playing Diancie to evolve Gardevoirs or Vulpix to actually grab extra Pokemon out. Sylveon allows you to grab any free cards you want from your deck, so it's very easy to set up. So as you can grab sort of like Rare Candy, DCE, Gardevoir if you already have a Fairy Energy in hand, for example. And he's also playing a Tech Turtonator, which is, I think his main use for the Turtonator was actually to counter sort of a lot of Golispod decks. You know, with the popularity increasing since Mark has actually won Bremen Regionals. Turtonator allows him to actually, just using a DC, put 40 damage on a Golispod, but should they try to attack again, whilst Turtonator is still active, they'll take a further 80 damage from him. I believe it's called Shell Trap. So Tamao has used his GX attack, which I believe is called Twilight GX, which allows him to shuffle 10 cards back from his discard pile into his deck, sort of getting back all those resources, so maybe getting those rare candies back, because he did have to Ultra Ball one away, and also at the same time use one to evolve his first Gardevoir. But now he's got all those resources back again. He can continue sort of chain evolving Gardevoirs and hopefully setting up lots and lots of different play. So Jack here attaches a Grass Energy to Wimpod, instructs and finds the Rescue Stretcher to actually get the Golispod here. Tapu Koko has free retreat, which is why it's what we've seen in a lot of different decks now. He's been able to retreat and use First Impression, which is very strong play, taking out the Gardevoir and being able to actually take another 2 prizes. So it's now down to 3 prizes, whilst Tamao's down to 4. Tamao sort of responds quite quickly as well, with a rare candy already in hand and a Rescue Stretcher. Rescue Stretcher's back the Gardevoir and rare candy's back into it again. So yet again he's got 2 Gardevoir GXs on his board, and is able to actually use Tapu Lele's Wonder Tag as well to also grab a Sycamore, so he can continue burning through his deck, since he did just put 10 cards back in. He's got Turtonator active, so I'm assuming he is probably likely to be looking for either a double Secret Spring, which this looks like he is double spring just there, to the Turtonator to use that Shell Trap attack, putting 40 damage, because Golispod is actually weak to fire, and then also protecting itself from further damage as well, as Golispod's only a 1 energy attacker. Gardevoir does need a lot of energy to be able to one-hit KO it. So by using this 40 damage plus potential 80 if Jack decides to attack into it again, Gardevoir doesn't need as much energy, therefore to actually sort of finish the job, as it were. So Jack's here is in a spot where he could potentially, he doesn't have an Ace of Roller, it looks like, but he doesn't have a Wimpod on the bench anyway, so he wouldn't be able to chain the attack. So he does Sycamore. And this is after Tamao's played a Field Blower, so he can't stand in and just retreat again. There's the Float Stone onto the Golispod, which is quite interesting. Normally, in certain cases, you might attach that to Zoroark, but here he's actually going for I think it's called Mind Jack attack. So he's dealing 100 damage to his Turtonator, dealing 80 damage back to himself, and retreating his Golispod, sort of protecting it from future issues. I guess it's quite good to actually have that Floatstone on the Golispod, since he knows that this Zoroark's likely to go down. What he doesn't know is Tamao actually has a Guzma in hand, but whether that's useful enough to actually deal enough damage to Golispod is another thing. So Tamao's considering what he's doing here, so it looks like he's gonna Tapu Lele. We'll just give him a moment to think about it. Ooh. There you go, so he's decided to Sycamore in the end. So much for what I was thinking. I guess in his current position, Turtonator's actual Shell Trap actually does just 20 damage, which is perfect enough to knock out the Zoroark, and still leave that sort of ability of the actual attack active, so if anything else attacks it, it will continue to do 80 damage to itself. So Tamao's Secret Spring to the Gardevoir there and attaches DCE, so he's powering up his board, getting ready to take out the Golispod, should it come back up again. And he's taken the KO on Zoroark, so now they're all even, 3 prizes each. This is actually becoming quite an interesting game. Jax here might be struggling a little bit, as he has decided to evolve that other Golispod on the actual bench there. It might have proven useful to actually have saved it and actually been able to use it for further Golispod GXs, so he can continue to chain attacks. But as it stands right now, if Jack decides to attack into the Turtonator, yes, he will knock it out with Golispod's First Impression. but we'll take that 80, putting it down to only 90 HP. So Gardevoir only actually needs so much damage. Jack's decided to protect the Golispod here, which is an interesting play. So it fully heals the sort of the Wimpod, and he's already attached DC to Tapu Koko. So it looks like he's just going to flying flip, sort of setting up damage onto these other Pokemon. Yeah, and I don't think Tamao's is looking like in a really good position here. So he's Ultra Balling away his Remoraid, and I believe that's a Curlier, as it's not really what he's needing anymore. But he does have a couple of different cards he could go for, so he could start trying to set up another Pokemon. He could go for a Tapu Lele. Oh, there you go. Tapu Lele and Acerola. So it looks like he's just going to go protect that Turtonator and really start applying a lot of pressure using Gardevoir to attack. There you go. It's a nice pretty full art Acerola there, or Acerola, I don't know, whichever you guys prefer to call it. So he does only send up the no energy Gardevoir, but with 2 Secret Springs, or even a Secret Spring and a standard attachment, he still actually has 1 more energy in hand, so he can decide to attach that anywhere he wants. He only really needed the 1 energy to knock out this Tapu Koko, but it's just sort of future-proofing him for later. There you go, there's his manual attachment as well. So now it's doing 150 damage to that Tapu Koko, overkilling it just a slight bit. But this now leaves Tamao with just 2 prizes left, so Tamao's in a very favourable position, as it were. Jack has sent up the Oranguru, but he does have a Floatstone in hand. Remember, he does have the Golispod and an energy in hand as well. But if he does decide to attack with a Golispod, so Gardevoir's already doing a base 90 damage from his energy itself, 120 with the energy attached to the Golispod if he decides to do so. So it's 90 damage left, so if Tamao can somehow find a DCE choice band if Jack decides to attack with this, he does actually take the first game. I think this is where Jack's starting to think about the sort of amount of damage that he's actually doing now, and actually how he's going to be able to try and prize race, I guess. So with a choice band, Golispod's doing 150, so that Tapu Koko setup attack actually allows him to take the prizes, taking him down to 1. But Tamao with DCE, Spring, Energy, just everything he needed in hand. Choice band, DC, Fairy Energy, takes the 1-hit KO on the Golispod and takes the first game. So there you are, ladies and gentlemen. Game 1 Tamao, 1-0. Yeah, so that is actually quite an interesting sort of matchup. We've seen, I think, with Golispod against Gardevoir, I think it tends to be favoured in Golispod's side. I guess I'm not too sure, particularly on the Zoroark build as such, because with Gardevoir you're sort of shutting off Gardevoir's ability, and whilst you're doing 120, which is sort of perfect for you to hit the Gardevoirs, really allows you to sort of generally put so much pressure on the actual Gardevoir players, because then they're having to search for things like Field Blower, then the energies. You tend to take the game more often than not. But with this matchup, it could be a little bit more different. Jack's able to stream the attack a bit more, however Tamao's able to actually build up the attackers a little bit better than he would if he was playing a Garb variant. So we'll just wait for these guys to set up, and hopefully we can get through to the second game pretty soon. So I'm going to assume that Jack's actually going to go first again. It's quite natural all the time to actually just go first, as there's not too many decks that would actually just want to actually go second. Even decks like Xerneas Break, where it's still better to get first. Start setting up your board, and then you can always Geomancy your turn too. So here we go. Wimpod active again, and Ralts is also active for Tamao. Just so you know, Wimpod actually has an ability called Wimp Out. So turn 1 is actually able to retreat, as it has no retreat cost on its first turn. And Jack's actually got the exact setup as he had before as well, minus the Tapu Lele. because he actually already had an N game 1 before Tapu Leleing for a supporter. So his board again is 2 Wimpods with one on the bench with a Grass Energy and a Zoroark. And Tamao's drawn into, it looks like the Turtonator N Remoraid. I think that might be a Gardevoir GX as well. And Jack's decided to wimp out into the Zoroark. He knows he's holding a Float Stone, so he knows as he's holding 2, he's quite happy to attach the first one. Potentially could bait the first Field Blower away from Tamao. Tamao equally good setup board without even playing Brigitte, so both these decks are actually playing Brigitte, and actually not even requiring to use them. Unfortunately, Tamao, there's not much he can do turn 1. He could have potentially used a Turtonator, but at this current moment in time, getting that 120 on the Golispod by attacking into it with Turtonator is actually quite a good, or maybe better option than necessarily putting 20 on the Zoroark and potentially having 80 on the Golispod. So all these small little things. So Tamao passes, having not played any other cards. Jack, I think, just drew into that Golispod, which is very nice. Attaches the Grass Energy to the second Wimbod and plays a Guzma on the Energy routes, which seems like the right play to do, in all honesty. And takes the first KO, exactly the same as game 1. This time Tamao is actually able to hopefully try and retaliate with Turtonator. I'm trying to look at his hand. Tamao actually doesn't have the rare Candy, I believe, so can't evolve into that Gardevoir. So plays an N, putting him back to a fresh new 6 cards. Oh, drops a card. Terrible shuffling. And Jack down to 5. Now I can really start to see why it's actually quite difficult for one person commentating to really keep this up. But I really hope you guys are still with me. I haven't put you guys to sleep yet. Showing you guys quite an interesting matchup. So Tamao evolves a Rolts, gets the DCE ready to actually use Shell Trap, put the 40 damage on Golispod and protect it from the next attack, and getting some retaliation damage through the actual attack itself. So Tamao with a Choice Band is actually doing 100 damage with the Shell Trap. So this is even more interesting than it was before. So it's really racking up the damage that you can actually do onto this Golispod. Jack benches another Wimpod, so he does sort of realise the idea that he does actually have to start setting up second and third Golispods, maybe even fourth if he ever hits the Choice Band, not Choice Band, Rescue Stretcher as it were. So at this moment in time, what would you do? You possibly Ultra Ball away that Osirola Energy. Try and grab maybe a Tapu Lele to get another supporter. Or if he has a supporter in hand already, he'd hopefully try and grab the Zoroark. I couldn't really see what else was in his hand. Unfortunately, it looks like he's wanting to take that stage 1 non-GX Golispod again. No, he's gone for Oranguru. He's gone for consistency. Seems like a pretty good play. He needs to look at his hand, see what he can actually do with it again. I believe that's a DCE in hand. Yes, it is. It's got a DCE. Benches the Oranguru. Attaches DCE to Wimpod. Oh, no, he has actually just double attached, which Tamao has just pointed out. So he probably could instruct. Oh, maybe not. Unfortunately, I can't really hear what's going on here, but this is really, really good play here. Mallow allows you to search for any 2 cards and put them on top of your deck, and then shuffle the rest of your deck, of course. But in combination with what we used to have, Shaman EX, but now Oranguru or even Octillery, which allows you to draw up to 5, Oranguru allows you to draw up to 3. Jack guarantees the 3 cards, 2 of the 3 cards that he wants. So there you go, he does have the Golispod. He does get a Float Stone. Now this is pretty interesting as well. This is another avenue. So this Golispod has Resolute Claws, is a Grass and DCE. And if your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon GX or EX, it does 70 more damage. So it's doing 150 damage. So it's really racking it up on this Turtonator. It has taken 80 onto itself. However, with its armor, after applying weakness and resistance, Turtonator is actually only doing 10 damage to it. So Tamao there attaches energy to routes, evolves into the Gallade, which is quite interesting. But I guess the combination of Gallade and Octillery really does sort of prove to be quite fruitful. He does Tapu Lele also for a Sycamore, sort of hoping to burn through his deck a bit more. There you go, we've just seen the Sylveon that he actually does play. Not too sure what Tamao's actually drawn here. He's drawn another Routes, another Energy. I believe he's now going to Premonition. So rearrange the top 5 cards of his deck, which is Premonition's ability, or Gallade's ability, sorry, Premonition, and put them back on top of your deck in any way you would like. So guarantee the next turn that hopefully he will get, or more likely to get, another card that he actually wants and needs. There you go, looks like he's made his mind up. So what's interesting here, as mentioned, Turtonator can do an extra 10 damage to this Golispod. And this Golispod essentially will be able to knock out the Turtonator. However, it will also go down going into Tamao's turn as well. It only has 130 HP, and it only has 40 left after taking that Shell Trap 10 damage. So Jack benches Tapu Lele, looking for a supporter. Looks like he's about to grab a Guzma. Again, hoping to try and put more pressure on Tamao. Therefore, there won't be any damage taken from Tamao's Turtonator Shell Trap. So he looks like he's going to play the Guzma. I guess he's got a couple of options here. He could take out the Routes with the energy, which he does indeed. Chooses to go into the Zoroark and retreats back into the Golispod and uses Resolute Claws for 80 damage. He will instruct first as well, just to make sure he's ready and set up, and takes his second prize. So again, he's ahead on prizes. Tamao is yet to actually take any prizes, I believe. And this stage 1 Golispod is actually proving to be quite hard to deal with. Tamao does Guzma out the Golispod GX, attaches DC to Gallade. Oh, yeah, of course there's a Guzma, so he retreats whichever way he wants. And Gallade has Sensitive Blade, which I believe does 150 damage. Again, we shall check. And yes, it is indeed. Oh, actually, I was incorrect. It wasn't 150 damage. Sensitive Blade does 60 plus. If you play the supporter card from your hand during this turn, it does 70 more damage. So it does 130. Perfect numbers for that Golispod, but it was already damaged. So Tamao takes his third prize, I believe now, having taken out... Oh, sorry. First 2 prizes, having taken out the Golispod GX with Sensitive Blade. Jack has quite a few options, considering he has that Floatstone attached to that Zoroark as well. He is holding on to that Choice Band, knowing he's gonna need it to knock out a Gardevoir GX or potentially a Tapu Lele. But at the moment, he does have to deal with the immediate threat of the Gallade, which has 150 HP. So if he does get a DCE, and if he already has DCE in his hand, what he could actually potentially do is attach DC to that Wimpod, evolve into a Golispod, and knock out the Gallade. Jack's gone for a different plan of action here. He has used Tapu Lele for a Guzma again, and bringing up the Turtonator, which he's find troublesome just to deal with in general. Retreats back into that stage 1 non-EX, non-GX Golispod, attaches the DC to Wimpod, and instructs. So I think he uses the attack, takes another 2 prizes, and Jack's now down to 2 to Tamao's 4. And here we go with Gallade in the active position. So if Tamao plays another supporter, which he's likely to have already, see Ultra Balls away a couple of useless cards, since it looks like he might be Sycamoring this turn. finds Octillery. I don't know if it actually was a Sycamore. Sorry, might be wrong. There's Tapu Lele. Looking for the N. Since Jack would be N down to 2, and Tamao down himself down to 4. He's putting back that Sylveon, which may be useful later. But he's just trying to disrupt Jack's momentum, as it were. So this Golispod's actually been able to run through a couple of Pokemon already, just causing 1 or 2 small issues. But I'm assuming Tamao is able to take it out now with the Gallade itself using Sensitive Blade. Tamao also does have actually an Ultra Ball in hand and a Gardevoir. So there's Premonition first, which is quite interesting because Tamao only drew a hand of 4, so he can Octillery for 1, which looks like he's putting a rare candy to the top, so that he can actually, I was going to say Mega Evolve, but it's not a Stage 2 Evolve using rare candy of that Rolts on the bench. Looks like a pretty good play right now, and he does have Guzma in hand, so he's ready to knock out whatever comes up next and tries to hide or run away. A plethora of options here for Tamao. Plethora? There you go. So he's Octillery for 1, rare candy to the Gardevoir, and I believe he's likely just Sensitive Blade for his 3rd prize. So now Jack's in a bit of a spot above her. He's got a Floatstone Zoroark. He's actually got a DCE again, and he's also got a Rescue Stretcher in hand. So it's now down to what he believes he can do. I can't quite see the 3rd card. If it's a supporter, it probably works out the best for himself. But if it was a supporter, it looks like he would have insta-played it after doing the first 2 options of attaching DCE and using Rescue Stretcher. We've seen 2 Wimpods, I believe, go down already now. So I don't actually know the deck list by count. I'm going to assume he actually only plays 3, having to fit in that Zoroark line as well. So he does Rescue Stretcher just for the Golispod. Attaches DC to Zoroark, so he is looking for a potential Zoroark backup attacker as well. I think he just instructed into supporters. I believe that was double Sycamore and an N. What does he draw? So we do see quite a few different energy cards. So the only way he's knocking out this Gallade right now is if he does use Crossing Cut in 1 hit. Fortunately, it's not the best option because a lot of times you do want to save that GX attack for a KO on a Tapu Lele, for example. But it's just something he has to deal with. So he does Crossing Cut for the KO. Sends up Oranguru, which is very interesting. With Tamao at 3 prizes left and Jack now at 1. I think it'll be interesting to find out how Tamao actually does deal with this. He's a bit behind yet again, which in all honesty doesn't change too much for him. With these slow stage 2 decks nowadays, it seems to be fine for the opponent to take the first prize or 2, particularly as there's ends in the format, to give you a chance to come back. Tamao, he's really deciding what's happening here. I guess he would want to look for another Rolts if possible. But I believe it's possible he may have lost 2 already, so we're not too sure what's left. He does play the N. Now Tamao does need a Fairy Energy for a KO, no Oranguru, which will leave him with 4 energy cards on the Gardevoir itself. And then sort of starts to set itself up for the next turn big KO on either that Golispod, which already has 3 energy on it, so only needs 1 more energy, and he has drawn the Fairy Energy there. So his Secret Springs, has Choice Band, has, I think that's a Parallel City as well, which is also very interesting. So he does play the Parallel. Jack goes down to 3 bench Pokemon and attaches the Choice Band with Octillery to 5. I think Tamao can't really go wrong with this sort of play at the moment. Uses Field Blower on the Zoroark. It looks like all steam ahead for Tamao, in all honesty. So he does take the prize knockout on the Oranguru. So right now Gardevoir by itself is dealing 150 damage. with that free energy on the Golispod, it's another 90. So it's 240 damage right now, which could pose to be a problem. So Jack has actually drawn into another Wimpod, it looks like. But with Tamao and only 2 prizes left, the Tamao has a Guzma and an energy. He can knock out the Tapu Lele. If he just is able to attack this Golispod without losing his energy, he can also win via those means. He does Field Blow, the Parallel, and the Choice Band. The other interesting thing with the Parallel is actually Tamao could have removed his own Tapu Leles from the field using the bench to free, and actually then reduce the damage that Golispod does. So that's also actually another avenue to be considered. You know, because then Golispod actually isn't 2-hit KOing Gardevoir with just its first impression attack. So here we are. Jack decided to stand in with Zoroark, knowing that he can't simply go all in with this Golispod, with Tamao left with 2 prizes. And he does find a Guzma, however, attaches the the Fairy Energy, the Tapu Lele, DCE to the Gardevoir, and does take the 1-hit KO. So Tamao takes the first round 2-0. We saw 3 GX attacks used, and just saw how powerful that Gardevoir deck is when it has access to abilities, being able to attach so much. So Tamao won round 1, as I've already mentioned, with his Gardevoir deck. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed that. I hope it wasn't too boring. Please let me know in any comments below. Yeah, thank you very much. Hopefully I'll get the other rounds up shortly. Peace!